With the end of the year swiftly approaching and the Game Awards looming, we here at dadsxp thought we'd let you know what our Game of the Year is and our thoughts on this year's nominations. I'm CJ, and alongside me today is Paul. Together, we present you the 2023 dadsxp Game of the Year.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the 2023 dadsxp Game of the Year. My name is Paul, and I'm joined by CJ, and we're going to go ahead and break down in a more casual form what our pick for the 2023 Game of the Year is. However, before we go ahead and do that, make sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe to dadsxp. We make content for dads like us that enjoy playing video games. So if that falls in your area of expertise of, being a dad, drop a like and subscribe. We really appreciate it. Now, without any further delay, let's get right into this.
All right. Well, so what do we want to do? We want to start from the bottom, I'm guessing.
Yeah. We're gonna start from the bottom. This is gonna be very casual. The list on screen right now, for those that might just be listening, this is straight from the Game Awards. They have listed for Game of the Year the nominees being Alan Wake 2, Baldur's Gate 3, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, Resident Evil 4, and Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Oh, and The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Sorry.
Right.
For some reason, my eyes don't work.
So I think so we've sort of discussed previously what we think our vote should go to in terms of how we would rank these games, and we sort of come to an agreement on how we feel, everything stacks up against each other. So I think, we go ahead and just start with the bottom of the list.
Sure. Coming in at number 6 for dadsxp, we have Super Mario Bros. Wonder. This is a relatively new game. I think this is the newest game of all the nominees here listed.
Yes.
This is the one that came out the latest.
Yeah.
So it barely made it in, and it's a really good game. It's a standard Super Mario Brothers game. I played through it. I played it with my kids. It's really fun to play with as a group. It does have some accessibility features. I know we talk about it a lot, and we haven't reviewed this game on the channel, but we talk a lot about, as dads, games having accessibility. Well, there are some characters in this game, because you can pick other characters to play as other than Mario. So if you pick certain characters like Yoshi, for example, you don't take damage from enemies. You can just walk through the enemies. You don't take damage, which I thought was really neat, especially if you're playing with younger kids, like if you have children. And then if you're Mario, you can ride on the Yoshi and whatnot, but it's really fun. But again, when you stack it up with all these other games, it's not that big of a game for me personally, and that's why I wanted it down here. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think, it's like, it's a 2D Mario game. If it was a 3D Mario game, I'd probably be a little bit more excited about it. But it's, it does some things different, but at the end of the day, it's something you've basically played before. And I think, too, I do feel a little odd about having games be nominated for Game of the Year that have released so recently, because I feel like it hasn't had time to, for people to settle into it and sort of that honeymoon phase to kind of, drift off a bit. I think, it's a Mario game, and I think if it was up to me, it wouldn't be on this list, but I don't think by any means it's a bad game.
No, I think it's a great game, but I definitely would not have it on my Game of the Year list. I'd probably substitute it for something like Final Fantasy 16, but that's just me. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to number 5, and I'll lead this one off as well, because I did review this one on our channel. Coming in at number 5 for Game of the Year for dadsxp is going to be Alan Wake 2, and this one was a tough one because, again, if there's another game that wasn't on this nominee list, I think it'd be a little bit higher. But Alan Wake 2 is a great game. It's a phenomenal game. I love the way it entangles you in its narrative. It's really fun to play through it and see it all come together. It does have like that survival horror aspect, but it's also more like a psychological thriller in my mind. The way you kind of use light to solve puzzles as you go through the game, and the way you see, and again, it's really hard to tiptoe and not talk about the story per
Right.
se, but the way everything kind of entangles and comes together at the end, I really loved the way this game came towards at the end. But again, it is not necessarily my game of the year either. It's a really good game. It's just not quite up there
Yeah.
when you stack it up against other games in this category.
Right. And I think too, it's like, we don't get a ton of AAA survival horror games anymore. And while that genre does really well in like the indie area, like on Steam, these like sort of cheaper game, not cheaper as in quality, but cheaper like price wise, they're generally a little bit shorter, more concise little games that are like really excellent, because I think it's easier to sell horror when it's in a short format, because it doesn't overstay its welcome and become, well, not scary. So I think Alan Wake 2, it's a return to a beloved franchise. I think people were really excited about it, and I think, it probably does deserve to be on this list. But in my opinion, if I'm looking at games that I want to play, number 4 beats this one, and I guess we can go ahead and talk about what that is, since it's pretty directly related, and that's Resident Evil 4. Now, we did discuss the fact that this game is a remake, and unlike Resident Evil 2's remake, it's not a gigantic, massive overhaul to the original, whereas I feel like 2 was very, very different. With Resident Evil 4, it does feel very similar in a lot of ways. Now, visually, it holds the same style. Somehow they managed to nail that style they kept. They do change things, they do move things around a little bit, but I think overall I do like it. It feels like more of a continuation of Leon's plot from 2, like the remake of 2, rather than a remake of 4 in a weird way. Like, I think the Matthew Mercer Leon from the original Resident Evil 4 is sort of like his own thing now. They feel like 2 separate people in a way in my head. And I don't know that this style of remake is something I would put on a Game of the Year list. It is a phenomenal game. It's excellent, but it is also sort of built on the back of the original, which it's very similar to in a lot, like so many ways. So I think, for me, putting this at 4 is, I look at these and I'm like, well, what would I want to play? Would I rather play Alan Wake 2 if I want to play horror? Or would I rather play Resident Evil 4? And the answer is I'd rather play Resident Evil 4, but that is my personal take. So yeah, if you have a different opinion though, let us know in the comments.
This is true. Let us know in the comments. I personally kind of like CJ said, I would not necessarily classify Resident Evil 4 in contention for a Game of the Year. Mainly because it's a remake, but that's just me. It's not necessarily meaning it's a bad game, because again, I would also play Resident Evil 4 over Alan Wake 2 if that's the type of game I wanted to go ahead and play, right? So Resident Evil 4 being what it is and being nominated on here, of course, we're going to go ahead and list it based on what's on the board right now, and that means Resident Evil 4 is coming in at number 4 for dadsxp. And I love the game. I mean, I played through the whole game. I loved it. It is a very close to 1-for-1. It's not exactly 1-for-1, but it's really close to the original. Like, if you've played the original, you know exactly what you're doing in this one.
Right.
And I really appreciate that. The updated visuals, everything, the way the game plays, the mechanics. Some things have been refined, which is you need to do when you're bringing a game back that's been so long since it's been out. And again, I think they did a phenomenal job with Resident Evil 4. I think Capcom has found what they need to do with the Resident Evil franchise here.
Absolutely.
But I love it. I love it for what it is. But again, it just falls short in contention for Game of the Year. But moving on to number 3, this is another game that came out relatively late, really close to Super Mario Bros. Wonder, and it's Marvel's Spider-Man 2. Coming in at number 3 for dadsxp 2023 Game of the Year. This game is phenomenal, but it is also just a sequel. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 took everything that made Spider-Man, the first one on PlayStation 4, great, and just kicked it up a huge notch. From improvements from traversal, from graphical improvements, from the amount of playable characters and how you approach them, it is all just refined to like the maximum exponent. Like playing Marvel Spider-Man 2 makes you wonder what can they do to make, if there were ever gonna, release a third installment, better, right? Yeah. And it's not just adding more content, because that's not necessarily what made Marvel Spider-Man 2 better. What made it better, in my opinion, was just the refinement, how the world plays, how you would. There's a lot of videos where you can watch online where you can do fast travel nearly instantly. But I would rather, swing around and fly through the city rather than fast travel. And that just goes to speak on how well the world is made and how much you want to just live in it. From that to the inclusion of a bunch of different suits, the way you could customize your suits, the way the fighting is in the game, how fluid it all comes together, it really does make you feel like you're Spider-Man, and it really is a great game.
You really hit him with the classic IGN line right there.
Really, for real.
Yeah, I think Spider-Man 2, it's like going back to the web swinging thing, it's like, if anybody remembers playing the original Spider-Man 2 back on PS2, GameCube, whatever, like that game's web swinging was just so excellent. And I feel like, these games, they do such a good job of like building upon that in a way and making web swinging like such a core focus, because I feel like in the past we've had Spider-Man games. I mean, I'm talking a while back, but we've had some where they don't really put a focus on swinging around the environment, which, to be fair, that could be technical limitations, I'm not sure, but I do agree. I think this game is fantastic. I think part of it is, and we're probably going to talk about this with the next one potentially, is that it's a sequel, and it takes a lot from the original, and in that sense, I think, I don't want to say it knocks it down, because it's like, of course you want it to be similar, but it's a great game, but I think it deserves its number 3 spot, and then that leads us into our number 2 slot,
which would be Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, falling right short of that Game of the Year slot. But, kind of like we were saying before, it is The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which would be the first one here in this series, did so much for the gaming industry, and it changed so many things. Every other game after that became an open world game, right? But here we are a few years later with Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and it took everything you know about Breath of the Wild and just fine-tuned it and made it better, and then added the ability of you to just create things, right, while you're in that world. And, your imagination is endless, really, with what you could do in this world of Tears of the Kingdom. But at its core, the game is essentially the same. And I don't mean this to attack the fan base at all, but if you look at its core, it's Breath of the Wild, extremely refined and extremely fine-tuned to showcase what the Nintendo Switch can do today, right? And it nearly pushes its limits, in my opinion, and it's a phenomenal game. So going in and giving it its flowers where they're due, this game can immerse you for hundreds of hours and hundreds of possible ways to tackle things and find your way to traverse around the world, get to your objectives, do what you're supposed to do in the story. And like I said, that creation tool is just opens up so many different doors to how do you want to approach your gameplay. So it's like they made an open world of the open world almost, which is really crazy if you think about it. It's kind of Inception, but it really is a great game.
I think too with that, it's like, it's done so much for gaming in general. Like, it's inspired a lot of features and styles in games that have come out since, speaking of like Breath of the Wild in particular. And this game just adding on to that and making it even better, just like we said with Marvel Spider-Man 2, like the fact that there are better versions of their previous selves is not a slight to them necessarily. Like, obviously, if you put these games up here and you put them standalone, you don't reference like the fact that they're a sequel and they've built upon what was already there. These are amazing games. Easily, I think the top 3, any one of them could have been number 1. And
correct.
It's like, the fact that they're sequels, I know we've mentioned it a lot. It's not one of those things where I think it detracts from it, but I think something that is created originally, I guess, is sort of not additive to the original experience. It's its own unique experience, like from scratch. I think holds slightly more value. Now, some people may disagree with that, and that's fine. Um, but I think, like I said, easily these three, any of the three top could be number one. And I think The Legend of Zelda fans got what they wanted with this one.
Correct. And I'll let you go ahead and take the number one spot since it's out there for everybody to know.
Right, right. So obviously you guys knew Baldur's Gate 3 was probably going to be number one, and then obviously when we showed you number two, then you did know. I did a review for Baldur's Gate 3 on the channel, which hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Gosh, you could talk about this game for hours, and you could still not cover it all. Writing that review was so difficult because Baldur's Gate 3 is like a black pit of content. It's literally a black hole of content. There's so much stuff to talk about when you talk about Baldur's Gate 3.
Well, and not to cut you
No,
off,
you're
but
fine.
like right there, what we just mentioned with The Legend of Zelda, it's like a open world within an open world,
Right.
endless possibilities. But that's exactly what Baldur's Gate 3 is in terms of possibilities, because every decision you make in that game just changes everything.
Right.
Like I have not seen two gameplays walkthroughs that even look remotely similar.
And you can approach the game in like entirely different ways, like immediately if you choose to. And it changes, like the companions you can have in your party and how they interact with you and things that happen in the world. I mean, you can make big, meaningful impacts on how your story will progress moving forward, like right out of the gate, which for some people is probably a little bit intimidating, but I think for this game, it works so well. And from the voice acting to the music to just all the fine details, I mean, there's just so much that you could talk about with this game. I'll be surprised if when the Game Awards come around, if Baldur's Gate 3 doesn't just clean house on every single category. Like, I think they genuinely might. I would be surprised if they don't win almost every single category that they've been nominated for, because there's not a single thing about Baldur's Gate 3 that isn't done like at like industry best. And I hate even saying that because I feel like they've surpassed what is expected of the quote unquote industry at this point. Baldur's Gate 3 is made by Larian Studios, and I feel like Larian Studios really has set the bar for what games can be. And I don't think that a lot of these other studios are ready to measure up to that. And I don't necessarily think that they have to in terms of like game depth and stuff. You can make a game that's good without it being like crazy in depth and long and, it costs a gajillion dollars to make. But I think if we're talking, AAA games, open world, adventure, RPG, story, interaction, all those kinds of things, if you want to make a game like that, then you better be ready to step up to the plate and duke it out with Baldur's Gate 3, because that's who you're competing against.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those games that defines a whole generation, really. And I think that's why I think it's so clear for us, at least, that Baldur's Gate 3 is the 2023 Dad's XP Game of the Year, because it just defines what the standard is. And back in the day with The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, that was it. That was defining everything moving forward from there. But in 2023, it's Baldur's Gate 3.
Right. So if you're asking yourself, should a dad game of the year, I say Baldur's Gate 3.
100%. Hey, all these titles are great. I would recommend each and every single one of these titles. If you're watching the channel as a dad and you're just wondering, yes, all six of these games are, yes, dads should play.
Yes,
they're all fun to play. They're even Mario, even though I don't think it should be on this list,
play
it
with
is
your
still
kids.
a very good play.
It's great for, honestly, especially for our channel. If you have kids, not everybody who watches the channel is a dad, obviously. If you're a mom or if you're a sister or whatever, if you have young family members in your life, Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the best game on this list. Period.
Yes, correct. 100%. But with that being said, I think that covers our Game of the Year for 2023. I look forward to doing this again with you, CJ, next year.
Yeah.
Whenever it's hopefully Grand Theft Auto 6.
Oh, yeah. Maybe we'll get like a new Resident Evil and like maybe, Elder Scrolls will come out. eventually.
That'll be probably 2 years
That's
from
wishful
now.
thinking. I know.
But yeah, if you all enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like and comment down below with your pick for Game of the Year, because we're really curious. I want to see where we all stand as dads and as just people in general on what game we think should win.
Right, and
I'm sure we'll see a lot of Zelda.
I also think too, and I hate to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No,
Let us know what games you think should have been in this list. That's what I want to know, because I have a few
yeah.
of my own personally that I think I would have liked to see up here instead of some of the choices that were made. So if you have some that you would change out, let us know about that as well.
Yep. Without any further delay, this has been dadsxp. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.